Put your headphones on. Now.
Welcome to Dreadloop, where the silence feels heavier.
If I hadn't resurveyed the northwest fence line in April, I would have retired in 2 years, collected my pension, and never learned what Varden Memorial has been doing with its dead. I want to say that clearly, right at the top. Because what I'm going to tell you sounds like a campfire story, and I need you to know I am not the kind of person who tells campfire stories. I'm the kind of person who fixes sprinkler heads and files variance reports with the county. I've spent 22 years keeping 14 acres of municipal cemetery operational in central Ohio, mowing schedules, drainage permits, headstone repair, fence replacement. The kind of work nobody ROMNTICIZES. My name is Cordelia Voss. Most people call me D. I'm 57 years old. I'm the superintendent of Varden Memorial Gardens, which sits about 11 miles outside Columbus on a 2-lane county road that used to be a state route before they built the bypass. 14 acres, 4,218 occupied plots, a small front office with a copier that jams twice a week, 2 full-time groundskeepers, a part-time office clerk, and me. I don't believe in ghosts. I want to be honest about that because it matters to the story. I have worked around the dead for more than 2 decades, and I have never once felt a presence, heard a whisper, seen a shadow, or experienced anything that a reasonable person would call supernatural. The dead are quiet. They are the quietest tenants you will ever manage. What I'm going to tell you is not a ghost story. It's a land survey. And there's a corner of the property, northwest, past the maintenance shed, where the fence meets a stand of pin oaks that were there before the cemetery was platted in 1923, where nothing has ever been buried. No plot sold, no remains interred, no markers placed. I need you to remember that corner. It matters more than anything else I'm going to say. I'll tell you why in a while. First, the fence. Every 5 years, the county requires a boundary resurvey of all municipal properties. It's routine. You hire a licensed surveyor, they come out. With their equipment, they walk the perimeter. They confirm that the legal description on your plat matches the physical reality on the ground. Nobody expects problems. The survey is a formality. You sign a form, you file it. You forget about it for another 5 years. The surveyor they sent in April was a woman named Than Nguyen. Calm, professional, about 40. She showed up on a Tuesday morning with a rod and a Trimble unit and a student intern who carried the tripod and didn't say much. I walked the perimeter with them because I always do. It's my property to know. We started on the south side, along the county road. Fine. East side, along the drainage easement. Fine. North side, along the tree line. Fine. We came around to the northwest corner, where the pin oaks are, where that empty section sits, between the last row of burials and the fence. Than stopped. She looked at her Trimble screen. She looked at the fence. She looked at her screen again. When did you move this fence? She said. I told her we hadn't moved the fence. It had been there since before I started. She shook her head. According to the 19 survey, this fence post was 31 feet from the northwest property pin. Right now I'm reading 29 feet, 8 inches. I didn't understand what she was telling me. The fence moved? I said. The fence didn't move. She was looking at the ground between the fence and the nearest row of headstones. The fence is anchored in concrete. The concrete is intact. The fence hasn't moved. Then what's the discrepancy? She didn't answer right away. She walked back toward the nearest row of graves, Section R, the oldest section in the northwest quadrant, mostly 1940s and 50s burials. She set up the rod next to a headstone I knew well. Edgar Loomis, 1892 to 1951, a veteran. Gray granite. Standard via marker. She shot the position. She checked the screen, then she walked to the next stone. Margaret Wynne, 1901 to 1948, She shot that one too. She did 6 stones in a row without speaking. Her intern stood behind her, holding the tripod he was no longer using, watching her the way you watch someone when you can tell they've found something they don't like. "D," she said, "these stones are not where the 2019 survey placed them." I felt something I can only describe as professional irritation. Not fear, not unease, irritation. Because if headstones had shifted, that meant frost heave or soil settling, or drainage problems, and any of those meant paperwork and budget requests I didn't have time for. "How far off?" I asked. "Between 1 and 2 inches. "All of them. That's frost heave," I said. "We get it every spring." "Frost heave is vertical," she said. "This is lateral." She looked at me. "They've all moved in the same direction." I didn't say anything. "Northwest," she said. "Every stone I've shot in this section has moved between 1 and 1.3 inches to the northwest since 2019. She pointed toward the empty corner, toward the pin oaks and the fence in the section where nothing had ever been buried. "Toward there," she said. I stood in the April sunlight, and I looked at the headstones, and I looked at the empty corner, and I felt something I did not recognize. Because in 22 years of managing dead people's real estate, I had never once felt anything at my cemetery that I could not explain with drainage, temperature, or budget. You can sense, sometimes, that a place has decided about you. I didn't understand that yet. Not in April. In April, I just thought the surveyor was wrong. I told Than I'd pull the historical surveys and compare them myself. She said she'd flag the discrepancy in her report, but wouldn't speculate on the cause. She was careful that way. Professional. Her intern, as he was loading the tripod into the truck, said something I almost didn't catch. He said, "Ms. Voss, has anyone ever been buried in that corner?" I said no. Never. Not in 100 years. Nodded, like that confirmed something. Then he got in the truck. I went back to my office. I pulled the 2019 survey. I pulled the 2014 survey. I pulled the 2009 survey, which was the oldest one we had digitized. It took me 3 hours. What I found was this. In 2009, the headstones in Section R were where the original plat said they should be. In 2014, they had moved. Not much, between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. The surveyor in 2014 had noted this as minor positional variance, consistent with soil settlement, and moved on. In 2019, they had moved again. Another 1/2 inch to 3/4, same direction. The surveyor in 2019 had noted it as continued minor variance and recommended monitoring. Now, in 2024, another inch and change. All northwest. I sat at my desk and I did the math. Over 15 years, the headstones in Section R had moved approximately 2.5 inches toward the northwest corner of the property. Toward the empty section. Toward the pin oaks and the fence. That is not how soil settles. That is not how frost heaves. That is not how anything works, but I am a practical person. So I did a practical thing. I went out the next morning with a can of spray paint and I marked the base of 6 headstones in Section R, a small orange dot on the ground, right against the southeast edge of each stone. If they moved again, I'd see it. Then I filed Than's survey. I closed the folder, and I went back to mowing schedules. That was April. I want to tell you what happened in August, because August was when I stopped being irritated and started being something else. But first, I need to tell you about the grass. The grass in the northwest corner, the empty section where no one has ever been buried, was different from the grass in the rest of the cemetery. I had noticed this for years. It was thicker, darker green. It grew faster. In the summer, when the rest of the cemetery was dry and pale and needed irrigation, that corner stayed lush without any water at all. I had always assumed it was because the soil there was undisturbed. No digging, no coffins, no concrete vaults. Just 100 years of root systems growing without interruption. It made sense. It was the kind of thing that makes sense when you're not looking at it alongside anything else. After the survey, I started looking at it alongside something else, and I realized the grass wasn't just greener in the corner. It was greener along a path, a visible gradient. The sections closest to the corner were lusher than the sections farther away, and the gradient followed the exact compass line that the headstones were moving along, as if the ground was healthier, in the direction the dead were traveling. I didn't say that out loud. I didn't say it to anyone. I wrote it in my personal notebook, in the margin of a mowing schedule, in handwriting so small I'd need reading glasses to see it later. And then I went back to work. My mower tracks straight everywhere else, Tomas said. I checked the alignment twice. It's fine. It only does this here. I looked at the center of the section. Just grass. Thick, dark, wet-looking grass. No marker. No stone. No depression. Nothing to see. How long has it been doing this? I asked. He thought about it. At least 2 years, he said. Maybe longer. I thought it was a soft spot in the ground. But soft spots settle. This one hasn't changed. I walked to the center. I stood on it. The ground felt firm under my boots. Normal. Maybe slightly cool. But that could have been the shade from the oaks. I stood there for a minute or so, and then I noticed something that made the hair on my forearms rise. And I want to describe it carefully because it's important. The cemetery was not silent. Cemeteries are never silent during the day. There were birds, cars on the county road, Tomas's truck idling by the shed. Normal background noise, but standing in the center of that section, the background noise felt farther away, as if the air around me was slightly thicker, not muffled, not dampened, just more distant. The way sounds feel when you're standing in a room with very high ceilings, as if the space around me was larger than it looked. I stepped off the spot. The sound came back to normal, instantly. Like stepping out of an invisible room, I looked at Tomas. He was watching me from the edge of the section. His face told me he already knew. You feel it too, I said. He nodded. How long? Since I started mowing here, he said. 9 years. It's always been like that. We stood there, the two of us, looking at a patch of grass in the October sunshine. Two middle-aged people who mow lawns and fix sprinklers and have never in their lives had a conversation about anything that couldn't be explained by drainage, temperature, or budget. What do you think it is? I asked him. He shook his head. I don't think about what it is, he said. I just mow around it. I respected that. I wished I could do the same. But I'm the superintendent. The land is my responsibility. The dead are my tenants. And my tenants were moving slowly, measurably, toward this spot. And I needed to know why. If you've ever felt this, the moment when the practical part of your mind runs out of practical explanations and has to stand there, empty-handed, in front of something it cannot file. You know exactly what I mean. In October, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I requested the original 1923 plat from the county recorder's office, the document that established Varden Memorial Gardens as a cemetery. The founding document. It took them 2 weeks to find it. It was in a storage room in the basement of the county building, in a flat file drawer labeled Inactive Plats, pre-1930. The paper was brittle and yellowed and smelled like dust and old paste. I unfolded it on my desk and I studied it. The plat showed the property boundaries exactly as they exist today. 14 acres, the road on the south, the drainage easement on the east, the tree line on the north, the fence on the west. But the northwest corner, the empty section, was marked differently from the rest of the property. Every other section of the cemetery had a grid of plots drawn on it. Rows, columns, numbered lots, ready for sale and burial, the standard layout for a municipal cemetery. The northwest corner had no grid, no lots, No numbers. It was blank. And in the blank space, in pencil, in handwriting so faint I had to use a magnifying glass, someone had written 2 words, already full. I stared at those words for a long time, already full. In 1923, before the first burial at Varden Memorial, before Alma Rish in 1924, before any of the 4,218 people whose remains I was responsible for had been placed in the ground. Someone, a century ago, had looked at that corner and written already full, and then they had never buried anyone there, and now the dead were moving toward it. I went to see the county recorder, a man named Phil Osorio, who had been in the office for 30 years and knew the filing system the way a librarian knows the stacks. I showed him the plat. I showed him the pencil notation. He looked at it through his own magnifying glass for a long time. Already full, he said. That's not a standard notation. That's not a legal description. That's someone's personal note. Whose? He checked the plat's title block. This was filed by a surveyor named H.R. Kendrick & Sons, licensed 1911, long defunct. Is there any record of what was in that corner before the cemetery was established? Phil looked at me over his glasses. Before 1923, this parcel was farmland. Before that, it was part of a larger tract owned by the Varden family going back to the 1830s. Before that, ... He shrugged. Ohio was the frontier. Before that, it was Shawnee territory. Could there be an older burial ground there? Could be, but there's no record of one. And the state requires an archaeological survey before you can plat a cemetery on potentially sensitive land. If Kendrick found remains, he would have been required to report them. Unless he didn't report them. Phil didn't answer. He folded the plat carefully and slid it back across the desk to me. D, he said, I've known you 15 years. You're not the kind of person who comes in here with questions like this. What's going on? I told him. I told him about the surveys, the GPR, the paint marks. I told him about the grass and the mow lines and the sound. I told him about already full. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a while. I don't know what to tell you, he said. That's outside my area. Whose area is it inside? He almost smiled. If you find out, he said, let me know. I went back to the cemetery. I went to the northwest corner. I stood at the edge and I looked at it, the way I'd been looking at it every morning for 2 months. The grass was long again. Tomas had mowed it 3 days ago. It was already 8 inches. The air in the center was still thick, still distant, still wrong. I walked to the center. I crouched down and I put my hand on the ground. The ground was warm, not sun warm. It was late October. The sun was thin and pale and the air was 52 degrees. But the soil under my palm was warm the way a living body is warm. Not hot, not feverish, just occupied. I pulled my hand back. I stood up. I walked to my truck and I sat in the cab with the engine off and the windows down, and I listened to the cemetery. Birds, wind in the oaks. A car on the county road. And underneath. All of it, so quiet I might have been imagining it, a sound like breathing, slow, deep, even. Coming from the direction of the northwest corner. The rhythm of something asleep. Or something patient. November 14th, I remember. The date because it was the day I was supposed to meet with the county parks commissioner about next year's budget. I'd canceled the meeting. I'd told him I had a maintenance emergency. That was true in a way I couldn't explain to a parks commissioner. I had come in early. 6:45 a.m. The sun wasn't fully up yet. The cemetery was empty. Tomas wouldn't arrive until 8. I came in early because of something I'd noticed the afternoon before. Something I hadn't told anyone. Something I need to tell you now. I had been walking. Section Q, the oldest section where Alma Rish was buried, doing my morning rounds. and I'd stopped at a stone I knew well. It belonged to a woman named Harriet Boyle, 1895 to 1952. A large gray granite marker, well maintained. Her family still sent flowers on Memorial Day. Harriet Boyle's headstone was 6 inches from its original position. 6 inches, not 2, not 3, 6. In the 4 months since Dale Bridger's GPR survey, that stone had moved more than it had moved in the previous 15 years combined. The migration was accelerating. I checked 3 more stones in section Q, same result. 4 to 6 inches of displacement since August. All northwest. All toward the corner. I had gone home that evening, and I had sat at my kitchen table, and I had looked at my hands, and I had thought, the dead are walking, slowly, underground, in their boxes, towards something that was there before any of them. And they're walking faster. That's why I came in early on November 14th. I parked by the maintenance shed. I got out of the truck. The air was cold, mid-30s, the grass stiff with frost. The sky was that deep blue-gray that November mornings have in Ohio, the kind that feels like the ceiling of the world has come down a few feet. I walked to the northwest corner, saw it from 20 yards away. There was a headstone in the empty section. Not at the edge, where the last row of section Q bordered the open ground, in the section 15 feet past the boundary of any plotted grave, sitting upright in soil that had never been dug, in grass that was still green and thick despite the frost. There was a headstone. I stopped walking. I stood there. The headstone was gray granite. Standard shape, the kind you've seen in every cemetery in America. Slightly rounded top, flat front, maybe 2 feet tall. It was clean, no moss, no weathering. It looked new. It had not been there the day before. I had walked this corner yesterday afternoon. I had stood in this exact spot. There had been nothing here. I made myself walk closer. I could feel my boots crunching the frozen grass, and I could hear my own breathing, and I could feel, with absolute certainty, that the air around me was doing that thing again, going thick, going distant, as if I were walking into a room that existed inside the outdoor world. I got close enough to read the stone. The stone said, Cordelia Ann Vos 1967, no death date. Just my name, my birth year. And a dash, and nothing after it. I want to tell you what happened in my body at that moment, because my mind stopped working and my body was the only thing left. My hands went cold. Not gradually, not like the chill in the air was reaching them. They went cold the way a light goes off, instantly. All the warmth pulled out of them as if something had taken it. My legs stayed. I'll give them credit. I did not fall. I did not run. I stood 3 feet from a headstone with my name on it, in a section of cemetery where nothing had ever been buried, and I stood there, and I breathed. The breathing sound was back. That slow, deep rhythm from underneath the ground. I could feel it through my boots now. Not vibration, pulse. The way you feel a heartbeat through skin. I looked at the ground in front of the headstone. At the base of the stone, the grass was pressed flat in a shape I recognized, a rectangle, about 3 feet by 7. The exact dimensions of a standard burial plot. The grass was pressed flat and it was warm. The frost had not touched it. Every blade of grass around it was white with ice. But the rectangle at the base of the stone was green and soft and warm, as if something underneath it was keeping it that way. As if something underneath it was waiting. Stood perfectly still. The cemetery was silent. No birds. No cars. No wind. The silence was complete in a way that silence outdoors should never be. The kind of silence that has a bottom to it, a floor you can feel. I looked at the headstone again. At my name, at the dash with nothing after it. You can sense, sometimes, that a place has decided about you. I felt it then. Not as threat, not as warning, as recognition. The way a house knows the person who has lived in it the longest. The way a garden knows the hand that tends it. The cemetery knew me. I had been here 22 years. I had maintained its grounds, repaired its stones, managed its drainage, kept its grass trimmed and its fences upright. I had cared for it the way you care for a thing that depends on you, and now it was telling me where I belonged. I don't know how long I stood there. The famous sky was getting lighter. I could hear, at the very edge of my hearing, the sound of a car on the county road. The world was still there, just outside the thick air, just past the invisible walls of whatever room I was standing in. Took one step backward. The breathing stopped, not gradually, not like a sleeper waking up. It stopped, the way you hold your breath when someone you've been watching turns around and almost sees you. I took another step. The air thinned. The sounds came back. A crow called from one of the oaks. The furnace in the maintenance shed clicked on, a distant mechanical hum. I was standing outside the section now, on plotted ground. On ground where the dead were buried properly, with records and permits and families who came on Sundays. I looked back at the headstone dot. It was still there. Still upright. Still clean. Still bearing my name. But as I watched, and I need you to believe me, because I know how this sounds, the grass in front of it shifted, grew, the blades straightened, slowly over the course of about 30 seconds, until the pressed flat rectangle was gone, until the ground in front of the headstone looked exactly like the ground around it. Smooth, green, unbroken dot, as if nothing had ever been prepared dot, as if it had changed its mind. I went to my office. I sat at my desk. I drank coffee that I don't remember making. At 8 a.m., Tomas came in and I told him I needed him to check the northwest corner and tell me what he saw. He came back in 10 minutes. "There's a headstone," he said. His voice was flat, careful. "It wasn't there yesterday." "What does it say?" He looked at me for a long time. "It's blank," he said. "The front face is smooth, no engraving." I went back out with him. We stood at the edge of the section and we looked. The headstone was there. Same position, size, same gray granite. But Tomas was right. The face was blank. My name was gone. The birth year was gone. The dash was gone, just a stone. Clean and empty. As if it had been wiped. I never told Tomas what I'd seen on it that morning. I never told anyone. I'm telling you now because enough time has passed and because I think you need to hear this part to understand the rest. The headstone stayed there for 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, it was gone. No hole in the ground, no drag marks, no evidence it had ever been there. Just green grass, lush and thick, in the corner where nothing has ever been buried. I checked my paint marks in Section R. That afternoon, the headstones had stopped moving. Every one of them was in the exact position it had been in when I last measured in October. No further migration. I called Than Nguyen and asked her to come out one more time. She shot the stones. The following week, her readings matched October's readings exactly. No movement. Whatever was causing it, she said, it stopped. I didn't tell her about the headstone. I didn't tell her about the plat. I didn't tell her about the breathing or the warm ground or my name carved in granite. That no one asked to be carved. I thanked her and I filed the survey and I went back to work. That was a year ago. The graves haven't moved since. The grass in the northwest corner has slowed down. It grows at the same rate as the rest of the property now. The mow lines are straight. The air is normal. The soil temperature is normal. Something changed in November, and I don't know what, and I don't know why. I have a theory. I've had a year to think about it, and here is the only theory that makes sense to me, even though none of it makes sense. I think the cemetery was showing me the job. Not the job I was hired to do. Not mowing and drainage and budget reports. The real job, the permanent one. The one where I stop being the person who manages the dead and become one of the people the land manages. Think it showed me my headstone because that's where I was headed. 22 years of tending this place. knowing every stone, every name, every plot number, every drainage grade. 22 years of caring for it. At some point, caring for a place and belonging to it become the same thing, and the place starts to agree. And then, it took the name off the stone. That's the part I can't explain. That's the part that keeps me up. Because it could mean it decided. I wasn't ready yet. It could mean I still have time. It could mean I passed some test I didn't know I was taking. Or it could mean it was never asking. It was just showing me where the grass is greenest, where the soil is softest, where the dead are moving, slowly, year by year, toward whatever was there before any of us died, and then it wiped the stone clean and gave me back my morning. My coffee, my truck, my mowing schedule, my ordinary, explainable life. I don't know why. It let me go. You can sense sometimes that a place has decided about you. I know what Varden Memorial decided. I saw it carved in granite on a November morning in a section where nothing has ever been buried. I just don't know if the decision was permanent or postponed. I still work here. I still come in every morning. I still walk past the northwest corner. The grass is short. The ground is cool. The air is normal, but sometimes, when I'm standing in the older sections, checking a stone or pulling a weed or replacing a flag, I feel the ground shift under my boots. So slightly that I can't be sure. A settling, a softness, a direction. Northwest. Toward the corner where nothing has ever been buried. Toward the place that was already full before anyone arrived. I go back to my office. I file my reports. I drink my coffee. I mow the grass. And I try not to think about the fact that the soil has preferences, and that it preferred me. Good night.